On April 15, 1974, Theodore Falcone, along with his wife Isabella and two children, Arabella and Nathaniel, escaped the ranch they had recently purchased after a night of terror that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. The story Theodore told the authorities is terrifying, to say the least. Theodore described what he encountered as the Skinwalker, saying it matches the description of the entity given by the previous three families. Though initially skeptical of the legends of the cursed land by Native Americans, he now believes unforeseen forces lay dormant on his land and are best left undisturbed. Skinwalker means a harmful witch who takes the form of an animal, usually a wolf or coyote. In 1994, two investigative journalists from New York heard the story, and it took them a few months to track down Mr. Falcone. Their journey took them to a house in the middle of the woods in Lake Tahoe, California, where Theodore Falcone now lives a quiet life with his family. This is the story he told to the journalists. That day still haunts me, and this nasty scar is a constant reminder of the horrors we went through on that property. For many years, I tried to find out how I must have got it, but the doctors have no explanation for it. Some experts compared it to petroglyphs or rock carvings, oddly similar to the ones created by the Navajo tribe. It is physical evidence of the nightmare etched into my skin forever. I first heard of the Skinwalker Ranch from a friend at our golf meet. What started as a joke soon turned into my obsession. My friend had laughed about buying the property that had been abandoned and had been up for sale for as long as anyone could remember. We were curious if the stories told by the previous owners were true. I couldn't stop thinking about the ranch, and one day, on a whim, I bought the property at a steal, far below its market value. I convinced my family to accompany me on a month-long adventure on the ranch. Isabella was not keen on spending time in a remote location, but after I insisted, she agreed. The kids weren't happy because moving to the ranch meant no TV or meeting friends for a month, and they would have to spend time outdoors horse riding or doing outdoor activities. On April 2, 1974, the four of us moved to the ranch and saw it for the first time. Built in the 1800s, it was a vast property in the middle of the desert with a line of trees on one side that led to a forest. I was mystified as I stepped out of my car. A local told me that it was the same place that once belonged to the Navajo tribe. But when they were forced out of their lands by the Utes, the Navajo cursed the land with a Skinwalker curse to torment the Utes tribe for driving them away from their home. It was said that witches would descend and take the form or wear the skin of various predatory animals like wolves and terrorize the people on that land. As someone who never believed in this kind of stuff, I was just treating this as an adventure and was eager to share these stories with my other rich friends. Soon I saw the first strange thing. Right before we entered the house, we noticed large spikes at the front door, like they were meant to stop something from coming in. I figured that because the house was close to a forest, the previous owners might have installed them to keep wild animals out. When we got inside, every door and window had a deadbolt. I didn't want my family to worry, so I quickly pointed out the old artifacts decorating the house. But the mystery of what those locks were meant to keep out lingered in my mind, creating a sense of unease that followed me throughout the day. While our workers unloaded our bags, we walked around the property. As we were walking, I got a glimpse of what appeared to be a wolf near the woods. I quickly asked my butler to bring my rifle, just in case the wolf came closer. We paused, watching to see where the wolf was going. It started coming towards us, and for some reason, I just stood there, unable to move. As it got closer, we all noticed it getting bigger, and it wasn't until it was just a few feet away that we saw its massive size. This wolf was a giant, over 6 feet long, and had an awful rotting smell that followed it. It walked past us towards the barn, and suddenly attacked my daughter Arabella's pony. That snapped us out of our trance-like state, and I raised my rifle, firing several shots at the wolf. But shockingly, the bullets didn't seem to affect it at all, adding to the horror of the moment. The wolf grabbed the pony's head in its massive jaws and ran off, leaving us in shock. I gathered the butler and two workers, and we hurried after the wolf into the woods. We entered the woods with our guards up, immediately noticing the muddy ground with the wolf's tracks. We followed these prints for a while until they led us to a clearing where, mysteriously, the tracks just disappeared, as if the wolf had vanished into thin air. There was no sign of the pony, just a few drops of blood. On our way back, I was haunted by questions. Why hadn't I shot the wolf before it got close, knowing it could have attacked any of us? And why did my bullets have no effect when I shot it? We had just arrived, and I didn't want to alarm my family with these worries. So when I got back, I tried to comfort Arabella by promising to find her pony despite the fear and confusion I felt inside. We got used to the place quickly, and for a few days, everything was normal. We did notice some spots in the house were unusually cold, but we figured it was just drafts since the house was big, old, and had been empty for a while. We didn't think it was a big deal until strange occurrences that defy any logical explanation started to happen. One night, I was awoken by a bright light flashing from the window. I walked to the window to see what was happening and saw several glowing lights in the distance. At first, I thought the lights might be from people using flashlights in the distance, but they stayed still. I wondered if maybe hunters were trespassing on our land. As I watched the lights, I noticed our animals frozen in place, looking up at something in the sky. I couldn't see what they were looking at, but they didn't move for a long time. I felt a strong urge to go outside and investigate, but suddenly I found myself unable to move my legs. I was stuck there, watching for hours until the lights abruptly disappeared. Only then could I move again. At that moment, the animals also seemed to snap out of their daze and went back to grazing, as if nothing had happened. In the days that followed, I constantly felt like someone was watching me, whether inside my home, outside, or anywhere else. I found myself looking over my shoulder every few minutes, thinking I might be losing my mind, but I couldn't shake the feeling. Isabella started experiencing odd things too, making her think she was going crazy. One day, she had just arrived from the garden with a basket full of vegetables and had put them away. She left the kitchen for a moment, but when she returned, the vegetables were back in the basket sitting on the counter, as if she hadn't touched them at all. She was puzzled, but thought maybe she had forgotten. Another time, she hung her bathrobe in the bathroom, but after she came out of the shower, the bathrobe was missing. Instead, she found it folded in the closet. These strange occurrences added to the eerie feeling that something was not right. Isabella was convinced she had developed some neurological problem, making her forget things. But when I shared the things happening with me, we understood it was not us, but something was meddling with not just our minds, but our lives. With such spooky instances happening, we were concerned for our children's safety and decided to leave the next day. Arabella and Nathaniel went to bed early, while Isabella and I stayed up to pack our bags. By the time we were done, we were exhausted, mostly because of several sleepless nights, and fell asleep on the couch. Around 2 a.m. I woke up thirsty and saw two shadows dashing upstairs. I thought Arabella and Nathaniel were trying to pull a prank, so I went to their bedroom but found them sound asleep. As I turned to step out, I saw the shadows downstairs and immediately knew it was something else. I ran downstairs and heard whispering, but couldn't make out where it was coming from or what they were saying. It was as if the whispering was coming from all directions. I looked at the couch and found Isabella missing. I rushed to find her and saw the front door unlocked. In a panic, I ran outside and saw Isabella walking in a daze toward the woods. I called out to her many times, but for some reason, she couldn't hear me. It was then I noticed a light above her head in the sky that was moving with her. I chased after her but couldn't seem to catch up, as if I was in a dream. Pushing myself to run faster, I followed her into the woods. There, Isabella was staring at the light in a clearing, and to my horror, the same enormous wolf was moving towards her. The terrible smell grew stronger as it got closer. The wolf looked menacing, with glowing eyes and a foaming mouth. It stopped a few inches from Isabella and stood on its hind legs, towering over her. Before our eyes, it started transforming. Its body twisted and stretched, and its fur melted away. In place of the wolf, a figure appeared that stood on two legs, a woman's figure. She was tall and had such a frightening look. It made my heart race with fear. I almost forgot to breathe when she looked at me, with those red, glowing eyes that seemed as if she was looking right into my very soul. Her face had huge holes around the mouth, through which her tongue could be seen. She lifted her long, bony hand and extended her index finger towards Isabella. I had to do something soon, so I rushed towards Isabella and pushed her before the witch could touch her. In a high pitch, the witch shrieked, and with her sharp, pointy claw, she tapped on my forehead, and everything went completely blank. I must have passed out because when I woke up, the sun was beating down and the heat was intense. It took a moment to realize I was in the middle of a desert, a place completely unfamiliar to me. I scanned the horizon for anything recognizable, but there was nothing for miles. And there was this sharp burning sensation on my arm. I pulled up my sleeve and found a scar that, at first glance, looked like an acid burn. It was painful, and the heat wasn't helping. I had no recollection of how I ended up in the desert. As I began to walk, my only thoughts were of Isabella and my kids, hoping that they were safe. On April 13, 1974, Isabella was found unconscious near the woods by the butler, who had then brought her inside and contacted the authorities. Isabella had told the authorities about the strange events that had been happening around the ranch. She also recounted that she had fallen asleep on the couch, but when she woke up, she was in the middle of the forest and passed out after she saw a horrifying figure facing Theodore, when suddenly, both vanished right before her eyes. A special search team equipped with cars and helicopters was immediately dispatched to look for Theodore, as it was a high-profile missing case. Theodore was located by the Air Patrol 48 hours later, 1,500 miles away, walking alone in the desert. He was immediately airlifted as he was severely dehydrated and had no memory of his journey or an explanation of how he reached there. Theodore was reunited with his family, who spent 2 sleepless nights on the ranch under police protection, anxiously waiting for any information about him. Theodore also confirmed Isabella's story to the authorities and shared the events leading up to their encounter with the witch. When the authorities went to the scene to investigate, they saw the footprints in the mud and followed them till they reached the open area and found the prints had disappeared, with no trace of them leading anywhere. The stories told by the Falcones were eerily similar to those of the previous 3 families who owned the ranch, as recorded in the old case files. The instances on the ranch remained a mystery, as no one could give an explanation for the occurrences. Theodore's mark was examined by a doctor who found traces of quartz, a discovery that was far beyond current scientific understanding. On April 15, 1974, the Falcone family left the ranch, vowing never to return. Determined to rid his family of the property's curse, Theodore Falcone tried to sell it. However, it stayed unsold on the market for years. During this period, he incurred heavy losses, with his company's stocks falling, pushing him to the brink of bankruptcy. He didn't want others to suffer the same nightmares his family endured, so he withdrew the property from the market. Now it stands empty, a silent testament to the ordeal. After the interview, the journalists, fueled by skepticism and a thirst for the truth, decided to visit the ranch against Theodore's advice. They reached the ranch at dusk after a long journey and walked the eerie, silent expanse of the ranch with cameras and recorders in hand. They walked for a long time, but didn't find anything out of the ordinary. Just as they were about to call it a night, convinced the stories were exaggerated, a sudden growl startled them. Their equipment started malfunctioning, buzzing with static, capturing whispers that seemed to come from nowhere. Their shaky voices could be heard as they started running towards their car. A dozen glowing eyes were recorded staring at them as they swiftly got into their car and sped away. The story and the raw footage remained unpublished for many years, only recently made public in the interest of ensuring people's safety. For more scary horror stories, please subscribe.